Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very important event. I hope we have enough participants in the room, but I think given how many people we have to speak today and how many important issues we have to get through, I think it's important that we start these things on time. On behalf of the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, I want to emphasize how very pleased we are co-organizing this event with BASIC and the Republic of Korea. This builds on the outstanding cooperation and work undertaken during the COVID pandemic and the series of webinars on youth in the NPT that were produced during that time. The focus on engagement with young people by many states parties to the NPT is growing rapidly, and it reflects an understanding that, on the one hand, there is a need to raise awareness among the younger generations about the dangers posed by nuclear weapons, and on the other, that many young people are already acutely aware of those dangers and have many ideas about how to confront them that should be listened to. The Emerging Voices Network that has been established by BASIC is, if you'll pardon the dad joke, emerging as an important element of global youth-based disarmament and non-proliferation initiatives. And ODA is very proud to be a part of its growth. And we're very proud to be able to sync it with our youth-based initiatives as well, and also the initiatives from the Republic of Korea. Creating space for young people from all over the world, giving them a seat at the table, and providing platforms for their views to be heard is a priority for ODA. Our flagship initiative, Youth for Disarmament, or Y4D, encourages young people of all backgrounds and experiences to get involved in disarmament. Our Youth Champions program provides education and training to some outstanding individuals who are already active in the field. And I'm so pleased that so many members of both initiatives are part of this event. If anyone is interested in what the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs is doing when it comes to youth affairs, please head to our website at un.org/disarmament and join the cause. At a time of dangerous nuclear trends, when the risks associated with nuclear weapons are higher than they've been in decades, the world's youth have a pivotal role to play in reversing those trends and mitigating those risks. They are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but they are important stakeholders of today. This unique series of events starting today and continuing over the next week and a half provides an important opportunity to enable such action. And I, for one, am very eager to hear what innovative proposals participants will come up with. With that, it is my great pleasure to invite Mr. Sunghoon Kim, Counselor from the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations, to make welcoming remarks. Mr. Kim, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Chris. Good afternoon. I thank each and every one of you for joining us. I am delighted that today we, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, to which this mission belongs, the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, and BASIC are co-hosting the side event advancing the youth non-proliferation and disarmament agenda. As an ardent supporter of the United Nations, and with a firm belief that young people are the ultimate force for change, the Republic of Korea has been a proud champion for Action 38 of the UN Secretary General's Agenda for Disarmament, which aims to establish a platform for youth engagement within efforts for disarmament. The Republic of Korea has been acting on its words. In 2019, Korea introduced a resolution dedicated to youth engagement, empowerment, and education at the UN General Assembly, the first of its kind. And it was a huge success. The resolution was adopted by consensus with broad support from member states, including 84 co-sponsors. To ensure that this theme of the youth participation would continue to gain momentum, Korea spearheaded the Youth Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Resolution again at last year's General Assembly. Thanks to the tremendous work of my colleague, Ms. Dahee, who will be sharing her remarks as a panelist, that resolution was also adopted by consensus by 83 co-sponsors. The Republic of Korea is acting with partners, with the UN to foster youth awareness in disarmament and non-proliferation. Held in December 2020, the 19th Korea UN Conference on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation featured a youth special session dedicated to discussing the issue of emerging technologies in relation to disarmament and non-proliferation. The Korea UN Youth Forum on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation held in June last year demonstrated Korea's continued commitment to amplifying youth voices in this field. The Seoul Youth Declaration for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, developed by the participants of that forum, serves as a perfect example of the role that youth play in cultivating a culture of disarmament and non-proliferation that is inclusive and sustainable. Korea remains steadfast in commitment to the Youth Disarmament Agenda, as its contributions allow the UNODA to host the Leaders for Tomorrow's workshop series and Youth for Disarmament photo contest earlier this year, both of which bolstered youth leadership in the disarmament arena. Now, our efforts have led us to where we are now. Today, Korea stands not only with the UN, but also with BASIC on the occasion of the 10th NPT Review Conference. It is truly encouraging that today's event offers an opportunity for us to have an in-depth discussion on youth and disarmament in the context of the NPT, whether it be nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, or the peaceful use of atomic energy. All of these topics remain relevant to the youth. In addition to these so-called three pillars of the NPT, I also look forward to the discussion on the fourth element of balance, diversity, and inclusivity of the regime at today's event. I'm certain that the panel discussion and Q&A session will help enrich the ensuing exchange of constructive, original, creative ideas among youth participants, which will be captured in the outcome document that is to be released on August 11th. So once again, thank you, BASIC and the UNODA for organizing this wonderful event. I'm confident that today's event will demonstrate the words of the UN Secretary General's Agenda for Disarmament, that youth will prove their power time and again in support of the cause of disarmament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kim. I'm now very happy to turn proceedings over to our chair, Dr. Togzhan KASSENOVA. Dr. KASSENOVA is a Washington, DC-based senior fellow with the Center for Policy Research at SUNY Albany. She works on issues of nuclear politics, non-proliferation, and financial crime prevention. From 2011 to 2015, she served on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters, and might I add, was its youngest member. She is the author of the recently released Atomic Step, How Kazakhstan Gave Up the Bomb. Over to you, Dr. KASSENOVA, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's such a pleasure to be part of this event. I'm really delighted that I was invited to chair it. My first thanks go to BASIC. I am really grateful that I serve on BASIC's board. And also, of course, the mission of Republic of Korea and UN Office on Disarmament Affairs. When I was starting in this field, now quite a few years ago, the field looked very different. I remember when I first came to Washington, DC in the early 2000s, and the interviews, the experts that I could reach out to for my PhD, they were all, senior people, and there were hardly anyone of my age, people in their 20s working in the field. And it just delights me so much that the field has changed. I observe with joy that the nuclear disarmament, nuclear non-proliferation, and nuclear energy field is now really an example of very good cooperation between experts and scholars and activists and scientists of different ages. And I really love this intergenerational mutual inspiration, and I find that this panel is part of this wonderful trend. The way we will proceed, we have our speakers. Each will speak for a few minutes, and then I will facilitate a brief discussion amongst our speakers, and then we'll have a chance also to answer questions from the audience. I really encourage everyone from the audience to put questions as speakers go with their remarks in our chat box. With that, let me introduce our first speaker, Ksenia PIRNAVSKAIA. Ksenia is pursuing her master's degree in science and technology policy at KAIST, Republic of Korea, and currently she is a research intern at the VCDNP in Vienna, Austria, and she's doing research on nuclear justice for the communities affected by nuclear testing. Ksenia is fantastic with using social media to raise awareness, to educate, and she has her own YouTube channel, YouTube videocast called Nuclear Pep Talk, where she interviews experts from the nuclear policy community. I encourage everyone to check it out. She already has quite a few episodes there on different topics relevant to nuclear issues. Ksenia, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Togzhan, so much for a very kind introduction. I hope you hear me well. And I would like to thank BASIC-UNODA and the Republic of Korea for inviting me for this wonderful and very meaningful event. And when I was preparing remarks, I really wanted to try to be very positive today, but bear with me for a couple of minutes because I'll start with something that is less positive and we'll come to something more positive at the end. So at the beginning of my remarks, I would like to answer a very important question that I'm asking myself all the time. Why NPT review process disarmament segment actually doesn't need youth? And so the first thing that comes to my mind is values that young experts bring to the field. That disarmament segment of the NPT review process lacks a lot, and that's very grave situation that I'm witnessing right now, being in New York and seeing what's happening right now on the floor. And the first value of like that is creativity. Young experts in disarmament and non-proliferation, they bring creativity to the field by introducing new formats that are different from, from papers that usually are issued by a lot of researchers or reports. We are introducing new formats like video casts and podcasts, even Instagram stories. And I know that doesn't sound maybe too serious to you, but believe me, I think this is one of the major ways now to promote disarmament values, not only among experts and even interested youth, but among major public and all those people who are maybe not that involved in the field. And this creativity of younger experts actually helps to raise awareness and promote disarmament to a wider audience. Another value that I think the disarmament process lacks, but young experts can bring, is transboundary and unconditional teamwork and research. Because I myself have been participating in many collective research projects organized by Stanford, organized by NARIC at KAIST. And these are wonderful opportunities for young experts from all over the world to research topics relevant to disarmament and to try to enhance the situation that we're seeing right now. But I think what's the most wonderful thing about this is that regardless of where you come from or who you are invited and you're welcome in this kind of collective projects. And I also think that's what disarmament process lacks a lot. This kind of projects and this kind of value, the transboundary and unconditional teamwork, urges to unite rather than divide. And that's what we need a lot right now in the NPT review process disarmament segment. Another value is being free of prejudice. What I'm seeing a lot right now in the disarmament fora is that because we're so divided by political, economic reasons, and especially with all these horrors happening in the world in different countries, a lot of people stop talking to each other because they have certain prejudice, stereotypes, history that divides them. And I think the younger experts are the stakeholders that actually can overcome those divides and bring those states back together even in the time of conflict that we are witnessing right now. And the last value that I would like to talk about is education. Younger experts striving towards better education and disarmament and non-proliferation. And the problem is, of course, investments. And I was delighted to hear yesterday the speech by representative of Japan, who actually mentioned that Japan is investing in UN Youth Leaders Program to promote education in disarmament and non-proliferation fields. But I wish more countries would say something like that during the NPT review process and during their general statements, because investments in educating younger experts is really important to enhance the current situation that we're witnessing right now. And that's why I think the disarmament of today actually doesn't need youth, because these values are not really addressed in the current process. However, we should not be pessimistic about it, because there is disarmament of tomorrow, right? Hopefully. And I think to enhance the disarmament of tomorrow, we need to stand by those values of creativity, of being free of prejudice, of unconditional and transboundary teamwork, and education to actually enhance our disarmament fora. And by doing so, we can also involve more states can involve not only civil society, but also younger experts and invite them in their delegations, so the youth can have their voices during the review process when it comes to disarmament issues. So I'll stop here, but I'm excited for a discussion that is going to follow after our remarks. Thank you, Togzhan.
Thank you, Ksenia. That's fantastic. A lot already that you put on the table. Our next speaker is Ms. Tonie Jacquez. She's a career diplomat and member of the Mexican Foreign Service since 1994. She holds a bachelor's degree in international relations by the National Autonomous University of Mexico and a master's degree in diplomatic studies by the Diplomatic Academy of Mexico. She's the disarmament expert at the Permanent Mission of Mexico to the UN. She served as a political coordinator at the mission between 2016 and 2019. And she was also acting director general for the UN and deputy director general for disarmament at the Secretariat for Foreign Affairs of Mexico. May I also add an informal addition, Tonie is doing fantastic work in terms of Twitter diplomacy. So I encourage everybody who is listening in now to start following Tonie on Twitter. You will learn a lot. So with that, please.
Oh, thank you for the generous words and for the invitation. I think that this is a very important event. I think that the most valuable thing that we can do is to raise awareness about the weight of our decisions in the future, for the future. So I am going to talk a little bit about the Latin American experience and why I am saying this with a lot of conviction. A lot of analysts and sometimes writers, scholars wonder why there are not a lot of researchers in Mexico or in Latin America at large on nuclear disarmament. And that is true, but unfortunately, there are not a lot. But I say that unfortunately, because of course, we would like to have more voices from our side of the world, no? From the South, from the global South, influenciating the debates here at the NPT and elsewhere. But at the same time, this is a blessing. And the reason why there are not a lot of people interested is because of the actions and the decisions that some people took in the past. And in the Latin American context, it goes without saying that nuclear weapons, for example, have been prohibited since 1967 with the establishment of the first nuclear weapon-free zone in a populated area of the world, because before there were treaties banning placement of weapons in the space and in the bottom of the sea and the Antarctica, etc. So in a densely populated area, first nuclear weapon-free zone was Latin America and the Caribbean with this treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons in this area that we call the Tlatelolco Treaty. And this was before the NPT, even before the NPT existed. So it is in our DNA to conceive nuclear weapons prohibited in our territory. And because of that decision of our diplomatic fathers, that all Latin American countries don't have that type of discourse or that type of reflection all the time in our psyche. That doesn't mean that we don't have security concerns, and that's another myth. Countries like ours have a lot of security concerns and have a lot of security problems, but those have to do more with, for example, lack of inclusivity or development issues or sustainable development issues. But we don't conceive the world as founded or supported by weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so that happened in the past, and that is how these decisions have impacted current generations. And at the same, I was saying, it is not good that there are not a lot of voices, but at the same time, it is good that this is not a debate or debatable in as much as it happens in other countries. So we have an advantage. And that advantage is that we have a lot of resources, technical resources, and philosophical discussions around something that has already been debated. And we have the Organization for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, OPANAL, the agency that implements the Tlatelolco Treaty, that is at your disposal. All the young people that are interested in this issue can go to Mexico City to visit the OPANAL, the organization, or can look at the website, which is a very good a source of information. I want to end by saying that not because this issue is not in the governmental debate, young people cannot discuss about this or should be devoid of the opportunity to discuss. And this is why the initiatives taken by, for example, the government of Korea and also the government of Mexico have been very important, because Mexico has been promoting the study of the Secretary General on education for disarmament for 20 years. Now more than 20 years. And this is an opportunity for governments to explain to the United Nations, to inform to the United Nations what they are doing to educate people in disarmament and non-proliferation. So my last comment is that young people, of course, have a say, and a lot of speeches and a lot of social media are going to say young people needs to be heard. The challenge here, nobody is denying that, nobody's questioning that. That's why we are very excited about all these initiatives. But the problem is how to make all these voices have access to the decision-making process. And I think that is the challenge. And I want to say that another of the avenues that we need to explore more and exploit more is the youth delegates in the United Nations, and also in the ministries, in the decision-making process. From the point of view of Mexico, this is crucial. We have a very fruitful program. Mexico incorporates youth delegates to all the delegations to the United Nations every year at the General Assembly. So this is something that can be done, and that way young people are involved in the decision-making process. It's not just hearing their opinions, but they participate. So I will stop here. So these are three things that I wanted to share with you from the point of view of my region, but I want to thank all the participants for their interest, because that's the basis and that's what it's going to ignite, hopefully, the passion to look for more information on this issue. Thank you, Togzhan.
Tonie, thank you so much. This is very heartening, to hear a senior diplomat actually saying out loud that we do need youth and we are interested in their input into the actual decision-making process. Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Dilan Koch. Dilan has recently completed her master's studies at Yale University, focusing on nuclear policy, arms control, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies. She's a 2022 Nuclear Scholar at the Project on Nuclear Issues CSIS and the UN Youth Champion for Disarmament, selected by the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs. Dilan, we are delighted that you're with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Kassenova. It's a great honor and pleasure to be speaking at this event today. I would like to thank UNODA, BASIC, and our OK Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their hard work to make this event happen and for their kind invitation. As Dr. Kassenova kindly introduced, I recently completed my master's studies at Yale, and I'm originally from Turkey. And again, as mentioned, I was extremely fortunate to be one of the 10 youth champions for disarmament selected by the UNODA. And I would like to talk a little bit more about the UN Youth Champion for Disarmament as part of my remarks, because I think it's very relevant to what we are here to talk about today. So UN Youth Champions for Disarmament, again, is an initiative by the UNODA to bring more young people into the conversation around disarmament and empower them to work for disarmament in their communities. And we started this program in the summer of 2020 with 10 selected individuals, and we had a series of trainings, activities, and field trips in New York and Geneva. And all 10 of us come from very different backgrounds, countries, and regions. For example, we have graduate students, engineers, and advocates working on a wide range of issues. And it was very interesting to see that we all have very different reasons why we care about disarmament. For example, some of us work at the intersection of disarmament and migration. The others look at how disruptive emerging technologies impact nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Given these interesting differences, what we all have in common is that we want to raise awareness around disarmament and promote change for a more peaceful and secure world, starting from our own communities. And I believe that through responsible and effective education and advocacy, such as the Youth Champions for Disarmament Initiative, we can build the next generation of policy leaders, scholars, and advocates, and make sure that even a small community of people with policy power have this issue as a very central part of their life. This is why I think it is crucial that our group exists, and this is why it is important that the youth is involved in this issue. In today's extremely challenging international environment, with challenges ranging from Russia's war in Ukraine, climate change, pandemics, migration, among others, nuclear weapons are still one of the most urgent threats, and they're back on the public discourse, with leaders using nuclear threats on a daily basis and countries building up and modernizing their arsenals. And with progress in disarmament slowing and bilateral and multilateral arms control frameworks being left behind, there are serious concerns about the future of the NPT regime. I think we should all remember that this treaty is nearly universal in its membership, and it requires a joint effort by each party state to the treaty to pursue general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control, as it is stated in its Article 6. So this means that this is not only a responsibility for nuclear weapon states, but for all states party to the treaty to ensure that the global community works towards nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. I believe that we really need to hear from countries that are not quite represented in the global nuclear policy discussions, in which we often hear more about nuclear weapon states. And second point, given that young people under the age of 30 account for over half of the world's population, and if you remember Secretary General's agenda for disarmament, which recognizes the youth as the ultimate force for change, we young people have a really major role to play in this. And we cannot do this in the near future, but we need to do it now. The youth should be aware that we don't have to be a diplomat or politician, academic, a scholar to be a part of the disarmament conversation and action, because this is not a state level or a regional issue, but it's a universal one concerning every one of us. And I believe that with educated, engaged, and empowered young people, we can have strong influence on how our societies and governments view these issues. And to conclude, I just want to say that as the divisions are widening between those who believe that nuclear weapons provide security and those who demand nuclear disarmament, we now have bigger responsibility as young people to engage with these communities and to be involved in more sound and nuanced policymaking in light of the current international security challenges. I would like to conclude with these remarks, and thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dilan. That's fantastic. Both useful information on the program, but also you raised, I think, very critical questions. Our next speaker is Ms. Dahee. She's the first committee disarmament and non-proliferation expert of the permanent mission of the Republic of Korea to the UN, with more than 10 years of experience as a career diplomat, focusing especially on multilateral affairs, including UN and international organizations, disarmament, international law, and so on. Dahee has been actively promoting youth and disarmament agenda in the UN. Thank you for that. Most recently, she was the vice chair for the 8th meeting of states on small arms and light weapons that just recently completed in June of this year. Dahee, thank you for being here, for contributing your expertise and experience. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to address such distinguished participants, including future leaders on the margin of NPT RevCon. The previous panelists before me have already shared brilliant and meaningful insights and views on youth participation and engagement. Thinking how I can also contribute to our dialogue today and spark further in-depth discussions, I would like to try to address 3 questions, skepticisms, or doubts that I faced while I was promoting the Youth and Disarmament Agenda as the ROK disarmament expert at the UN. The first question or doubt I faced was, is there really a voice of youth? Who is the youth and what voices do they have? Often we might encounter the mistaken belief that the youth is a single demographic, a homogeneous group with unified interests or similar values. Yet young people do not exist in a vacuum. In fact, their diversity is their strength. Different groups of young people, of course, will have different ideas, values, priorities, approaches, and insights. The more diversity that the youth can bring to the disarmament discourse, the more it will spur the stagnated discussions. The second doubts I faced was, what value can youth add? Do young people have the capacity and expertise, not just the potential, to analyze the ever more complex international security environment and contribute to finding disarmament solutions? We often face very strong skepticism that young people are passionate but immature and do not have the expertise or enough knowledge. Yet my years spent in the disarmament field, that's not really long, but have led me to firmly believe that the youth should be the part of our disarmament discussions, not only because they have great potentials, but also because the values they bring into the table here and now. Today's youth in particular are more connected, more interactive, more globally minded, and more dedicated and prepared to promote the values they believe in. For example, I know everybody is aware, but every member of the ICANN who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017, every member was under 35 years old. We do see many who are old and wise, but now it's high time to also listen to the young and wise. Now let's come to the second or a third doubt or pessimism I have faced quite often, or we have faced quite often. Is the participation of youth making any difference? What is the meaning of creative and inciting ideas from the youth if they do not lead to changes in policy and in our world? Are the youth events, or even today's slide event, yet another one-off that we pretend to pay attention and does not lead to any substantive change? Youth advocacy efforts have proved the ability, not just the potential of youth to be diplomatic experts and policymakers. For example, the Seoul Youth Declaration for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation in 2021 is now incorporated and referenced in many policy fora, including a conference on disarmament former plenary hearing in August 2021. Efforts for youth engagement have led to changes in the national, regional, and intergovernmental levels to institutionalize the youth security agenda, as in the Secretary General's report on youth, peace, and security. Inspiring young voices did not go unheard. Ideas and views proposed in today's discussions will be also reflected on youth working paper for the NPT RevCon. So probably my concluding remarks for the young leaders of tomorrow. I urge you to speak up, make your voices heard, form a partnership and strengthen network, call your participants and governments, and most of all, please do not give up. This is a marathon, a long and challenging process, but the decisions made in the area of international security and disarmament will affect you in your daily lives and your future. As a proud partner, the Republic of Korea will continue to support youth engagement and disarmament and non-proliferation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dahee. Thank you for your remarks, but also thank you for all your work in public sphere, but also behind the scenes, promoting youth engagement. I'm just speaking for myself. I think I get the hope and encouragement and optimism mostly from when I'm exposed to younger generation, new generation. I just had such a wonderful and inspiring experience in Vienna with all the events there. And I think it's because newer generations, they're less cynical and more optimistic, and definitely have more of the can-do attitude. But also I wanted to remind that the youth of today are tomorrow's decision makers and policy makers. So it's a natural process, right? And again, as an addition to the encouragement that we've heard from our speakers, that it doesn't matter how young you are today, how maybe you think that your own personal contribution is limited. Just don't forget that, with each year you get more and more access to make a difference. I just wanted to remind our audience that we will be happy to receive questions in our chat. Please don't be shy. But while you are thinking, I just had my first question to all the speakers with a hope to generate reflection on what you've heard from each other. And if I could ask each of you to just reflect, what is one thing that maybe surprised, inspired you, or was important for you to hear from the fellow speakers? Tonie, please.
Yeah, thank you. I am very pleased to hear that there are so many projects and so many initiatives and platforms already established and already, providing a channel for communication. Because sometimes we tend to think that we're inventing the wheel all the time. Or as we say in Mexico, we are sowing seeds in the ocean every day, like thinking that we're starting every day from scratch. And that's not true. So I think that one of the lessons learned from what I'm hearing is that we need to look more. Maybe now that the technology is on our side, we don't need to go to the library or somewhere as when I was young. A long time ago, to find the information, to look for information, you can maybe discover that there are a lot of opportunities for young people to participate already, and they don't need as much effort as one might think, to get involved. So this is my first comment.
Thank you, Tonie. And I see Ksenia is ready to provide her reaction. Please, Ksenia.
Thank you, Togzhan, for giving me the floor. So if I'm thinking of remarks from fellow speakers, I was really amazed by Tonie's remarks because I think it's ever more crucial for more senior diplomats who are already established and full-fledged to voice their concerns about the youth participation, because I think that's what lags a lot, and we're not always taken seriously, especially if we're ladies and young And I think that's also very important because though we do live in a very progressive world, we still see the lack of gender equality at the tables. And I mean, we can see it now in the review process. And I remember yesterday, I was amazed how I think it was an Irish representative, and she said that she was the first female Irish representative speaking on behalf of Ireland. And I thought, well, why is it that such an, like, in my young point of view, to me, it feels weird that we are celebrating that. It should be a norm rather than an achievement of a certain country. It has to be standard. So I was really pleased to hear that from Tonie. And I also think that her idea about creating youth delegates from United Nations, or other organizations or states or in ministries, that's also a very valid point. And we, I think, highlighted that in one of the papers we did within the Emerging Voices Network with BASIC and the inclusion paper, because it's true, regardless of how many young experts we have, the matter is not how many they are actually, it's about whether their voices count. And I think this is a really good way to make the voices of younger experts count. Thank you.
Thank you, Ksenia. Dilan and Dahee, would you like to add your reflections? Yeah, Dahee, please go ahead.
Yes, so just my very short reflection is probably also, I agree with Tonie that not a surprise per se, but I was just happily seeing that there are already many ongoing efforts to incorporate and listen to and also speak up the youth voices and to incorporate that into the policy arena. So what we can do, our focus further would be just not to just spark the new things, but also to more effectively engage and partner with the ongoing efforts and other networks so we can strengthen our partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dilan?
Yeah, I agree with everything Ksenia said. It was really, really nice to hear from Tonie that some governments and the senior diplomats are very willing to include youth in a very solid and meaningful way, and like making sure that they are engaging with policymakers directly. And I also love that, Dahee, you mentioned one of the challenges of youth participation being that people's perception, oh, is this one of those events where some young people will speak and like nothing will follow up? So it was really nice that you acknowledged that there's a problem like this, and there's also solutions that we are trying to figure out. And it was really nice to hear that. Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I can see we already have very good questions coming in the chat. I just wanted to ask more of a practical question. And my question would be, you were at different stages of your career, and a few of you brought up the fact that you personally experienced this slightly dismissive attitude when, because of being young, being a woman. I just recognized that we have an all-female panel. And I want you just to give maybe practical advice to young people who are listening to us right now and who experience that as they're trying to make a difference in this field. And I want to be fair, and I want also to do some sharing and just tell about my experience that, as the youngest person to serve on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board when I just joined. And, I was at least 20 years younger than everybody else. I must admit that unfortunately, initially, from some senior diplomats, I did experience this hierarchical, because especially I think for diplomats, hierarchy matters, and my way of dealing with it, what I recognized is that once you start producing quality work, that you actually can, I don't want to say win respect, but it's the dynamic changes. So I think I'm using my own example as an encouragement that sometimes it takes time, and not all people are smart and wise enough to recognize how much young people bring to the table. But I think as long as you have your own self-confidence and faith in yourself, and that you do your work properly, that, you know, in most cases, sooner or later, you will be recognized for what you are. So just do not despair. And yes, if I could ask you to maybe offer some of your advice and inspiration to the young people who are listening to us now. Tonie, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think that what you said is spot on. We should not despair if we are young or we are the youngest in a group. In my experience, it happened to me too. I was the youngest in the diplomatic academy in my promotion when I joined. Everybody was older than me. So I felt very proud and very happy that they were paying attention to me as a young person. And once I asked them, why do you like hanging out with me and writing, you know, doing research for the, you know, homework and with me, you know, because I am much younger. And they said, because you always want to learn, you're eager to learn. So I see that also with my colleagues now. I have a very young team, and I am very happy to see when they are eager to learn. So I think that my most important piece of a recommendation, I don't want to say advice, is always remain humble in a way that you are always learning, and that way you will always keep young, no matter what age you have. And young people will be noticed because wanting to learn, being passionate about finding new things and learning is a very attractive quality for work, for teams, for friendships, but also for professional life. I want to say my last comment, just because there is one question in the chat box referring to this. There is a stigma. Yes, I agree that there is a stigma on young people, as if young people, because they don't have the experience, which is the truth, this is a fact, that they cannot contribute. But I think that there is some truth to that, because experience cannot be acquired but with time, and that's something that young people might not have. But the only way to stop this stigmatization or discrimination against participation of young people is to try to see their view not as an experienced view, but as a fresh view from outside, from a different point of view, not trying to make it fit into the experienced professional opinions that sometimes we expect, and that's a very unfair vision. So you just need to ask them, what do you think? What do you think we can improve? You will be surprised.
Thank you, Tonie. Dilan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I kind of see myself as the person who's taking notes in this scenario, because these recommendations are very relevant and very helpful. Thank you so much. And I also believe that, I hope that given the quality of work and hard work, that young people like me should also be recognized despite their age or where they come from or their gender or anything like that. But this is, I guess, something I will get to experience in my career.
Thank you, Dilan. Dahee.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I was also the youngest person who entered the ministry same year with me, and then, you know, I'm a woman young, so whenever I just meet like very old gentlemen sitting on the table, and like, it's like kind of a struggle to be taken seriously, like, oh, who's that young lady? I'm not a young lady, I'm a diplomat, I'm a representative of Republic of Korea, listen to me. It's always probably what you already have faced, or you are facing, or you will face. I don't deny what we are having. Well, but I think what more important is the value and the additional value that you can bring to the table, as you mentioned, the expertise and your views, because it's, yes, it's true that young people lack experiences, but that does not mean that their views or their insights is not, worth our listening. So yes, the more you try harder, the expertise and your insight that you can bring, I think it's a way of earning the respect and trust that, okay, yeah, we should listen to her, or we should also take their voices all into the account. So I'm working with a very amazing team of very different ages. And even though we are a government bureaucrats, that we always have a hierarchy, but that does not stop us in discussing and, coming up with a probably better solution that one people cannot have. So, keep on trying, expertise, make yourself more experienced and learn more, as Tonie mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ksenia?
Yes, thank you, Togzhan. I think I have two pieces of recommendation that I usually do myself. The first one is can-do attitude. I think that's what younger people can actually add value to, because I think a lot of times when people are in this field for a long time, it's not that they tend to be slow, but it's just they take the process slower. and I think when you're young and you're at this energy that environment needs to progress and to develop, maybe into a different direction, but at least just faster. And I think this can-do attitude that younger people can provide within the internships they're doing, or traineeships in the different think tanks or international organizations can help out a lot to be taken seriously, again, because you actually do the job that maybe some don't want to do, but you do it, and then you become seen. And I think the last piece of recommendation is to experiment with the way you do your work, because I think there are very already established ways to express your opinion through papers, articles, reports, tweets, or speaking during the panels. But I'm sure there are many more ways to experiment with the way you express your expertise and with the way you share your opinions. And I think when community around you sees that you do something differently, you do something similar, but in a different way, that drags attention to you. And I think if younger people do something like that, their voices can be heard much better, and they will be much louder.
Thank you, Ksenia. So now I'll be switching to asking our speakers questions that our audience submitted. So I'll be asking a question, but I'll be waiting for you to volunteer if you want to pick up on the specific question. Don't feel the pressure that we don't need for everybody to answer one question unless you want to. But before I switch to the questions, I also wanted to draw the audience's attention. I saw that there was a request and a link to a survey. I only had a quick look, but it's aimed at those who experience trauma from nuclear tests and so on. So please have a look and check it out. Tonie already addressed this question, but I wanted to see if anybody else wanted to provide an answer as well to the question from Anahita Parsa. How can we incentivize states and organizations who maintain certain stigmas around youth involvement and don't engage with events such as this to implement tangible ways to include youth in their work within the field? Dahee, please.
Yes, of course, it's a very difficult question that I usually face also by myself, but one way could be also a resolution on youth and disarmament that we have been doing, that all countries, was in favor of it. It was adopted by consensus. But resolution is there as a way of raising awareness, but not actually leading to a specific actions, even though it's calling for it. So what we were trying to do, I don't know how successful that we have been, not only the Republic of Korea, but many countries have been vocal and active in the youth participation, including the Mexico, as Tonie mentioned, is that to make it a voice of General Assembly in the UN, also asking what the specific actions in the our GA resolutions that we have been tabling, and to have a report on what's going on the youth participation and asking for recommendation and actions. I know it's not a quick fix, it's a long process, but I think with this kind of actions, we are making a slow but still steady progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Ksenia?
When I think of it, what comes to my mind is a gender champion initiative, and I think that this is an initiative related to gender specifically. And I see in Vienna, work like interning at the VCDNP, for example, right now, I see how VCDNP takes seriously their commitments within the gender championship initiative. And basically, what they do is they set out certain goals for 1 year, and then they have to realize those goals and then report about the fact that we had we have equality in our office, we provided similar opportunities for females and males. So I think what a lot of think tanks and international organizations can do is to be participant of the similar initiative like Gender Champion Initiative, but maybe related to youth. And another thing, I think funders. A lot of think tanks and international organizations are mostly dependent on states, but for example, think tanks are highly dependent on funders. And I know that some funders do provide certain requirements that, the internships have to be paid, or, you have to include that many younger experts in your work. And I think if more funders do these things and actually ensure that youth participation is a requirement to get that money by think tanks, I think we can also progress on that issue better.
Thank you, Ksenia. We have so many good questions coming in. I want to ask the next one from Ali Alkis. And the question is, what would be a good starting point for confidence building measures for arms control and disarmament after the Russian invasion in Ukraine? And again, I remind that, only if you do want to answer, you are welcome to raise your hand and I'll give you the floor. It's a tough one. Tonie, thank you.
Well, of course, I don't have one quick fix solution on this one. And this is, of course, something that everybody's wondering at the same time. But I think that as a common thread, there is a little bit of deficit of trust in multilateralism and the value of dialogue. And there is this trend. I don't know who started it. I don't want to blame anybody. But it is before the crisis that we are facing right now, that says more or less like this: for agreements and for new treaties or for new commitments to exist, the security environment has to be, like top-notch, and the world has to be perfect and peaceful, and that hasn't happened ever. If you pick any year of any century of any point in time, there is conflict, there is disagreement, there are crises. Some years there are more crises conflicting with each other, and all of them at the same time. And this is one of those times. And other times there are, one at a time. So, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue the dialogue and continue working, and that the dialogue has to continue not despite the situation, but because of the situation. So what I want to say is that we shouldn't, the best strategy to continue arms control and disarmament agreements in this situation is to continue the dialogue, not stopping it. And that is something that history has shown, that in the worst moment of a problem, there can be multilateral institutions working on agreements. I mentioned the Tlatelolco Treaty before. That was negotiated just because the missile crisis in Cuba had just happened, and that is the coldest point of the Cold War. And in the middle of that, the Latin American countries got this agreement. So there are the NPT itself and other and treaties are a demonstration that multilateralism can work even when there is a deficit of trust. So the trust building measure is really the dialogue.
Thank you, Tonie. And I see Dilan, please.
Yeah, I also don't have a quick solution, but I wanted to point out two things in relation to Russian invasion of Ukraine that I think arms control community will have to think really hard about in the coming months and years. The first one is, I already mentioned in my remarks that the Russian invasion of Ukraine kind of strengthened these two camps in the nuclear policy community, kind of like people who think that nuclear weapons provide security. They also strengthening their visions, thinking that, oh, a major power with nuclear weapons have this much leeway and can do this to another sovereign country. So, or the other people thinking that, oh, maybe if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, this wouldn't happen. So there is a community that is kind of like arguing that, oh, maybe actually nuclear weapons provide security. And the other community also thinks about, oh, this is the exact reason why we should get rid of nuclear weapons immediately, because that's what nuclear weapon states can do, using this as a bargaining chip, as a leverage. So what I mean is, like, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in addition to all the impacts that it had on international security and international environment, it also kind of increased this division, this differences between these communities, which I think will be a challenge to deal with, because arms control requires these communities working together. So we will need to really address that. And the second one is security assurances. So security assurances are a big part of this NPT-centered nuclear non-proliferation regime, obviously, but in addition to KASSENOVA, UN Charter, international humanitarian law, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a serious violation of Budapest Memorandum, which without getting into too much detail, which basically several nuclear weapon states, US, UK, and Russia promised Ukraine and Kazakhstan and Belarus in 1994 that if they return their inherited Soviet nuclear arsenals, they would be provided with security assurances. And this basically meant that they wouldn't threaten to use force or use force against these countries. They would respect their sovereignty, independence, among many other things. So by invading Ukraine, this memorandum is totally casted away. So what does that mean for security assurances as a policy tool in the non-proliferation regime? Because a lot of states provide security assurances for non-proliferation purposes, diplomatic tools. So a country with nuclear weapons totally ignoring this and being able to invade another country, this raises a lot of questions about the effectiveness of security assurances and hence its role in the non-proliferation regime. So again, arms control community will really need to think hard about if we can keep using these tools as a non-proliferation tool in the near future. Thank you.
Dilan, thank you for speaking out so forcefully. And I think, what is also important that it's not only the obligations that are contained in specific documents, but that it's just such a fundamental disrespect and violation of the norms. And I think this is also, it might look less tangible, but actually I believe it's extremely serious, and its repercussions of violating international norms will be very long-term and serious. We actually had a question that was specifically asked of Tonie. Tonie, could you maybe briefly tell us a little bit more about the role that the youth disarmament delegates play within the Mexican delegation and what the process was like to establish the program?
Oh, well, thank you. I just want to clarify that the youth delegates are not for disarmament only. They are for the whole issues at the delegation. So this program is still current. We have had it for many years now, more, I think 20 years or 15 years since the establishment of a resolution in the General Assembly encouraging governments to do this. So the process is we have coordinated a call, a convening of applicants by the different governmental offices that are involved, and each year these the number of delegates varies from I mean, sometimes there are 5, sometimes we have 8, sometimes we just have 3. It depends on the year, of the level of participation in applications. It also depends on the resources, and they are selected by an intergovernmental intersecretariat panel that asks them, why do you want to become a member of the delegation, what your interest is at the UN, etc. And then they are picked from a selection. This year the convening call includes calls for specific inclusion measures for more women and for more indigenous population representatives, and that I think that is a very good development. So when they are already picked, they received some basic information training, then they are brought to the UN, and then they are made delegates. Let me just be very clear, they are not interns of the delegation. No. They are not locally engaged staff. No, they are delegates. They are as if they are the diplomats. And they stay here with us for a while, for some weeks, for a month, more or less, during the beginning of the work of the committees, especially. And they are distributed across all the committees. So it's not only for disarmament, it's not only for for human rights. I want to make an emphasis here because there is a trend, a little bit, I was talking about this with other colleagues in the morning, a little bit of a stereotyping in the government still. You know, more women and young people are sent to the soft issues committee, third committee, human rights, social issues. Less women and young people are sent to the hard issues, the peace and security issues. So sometimes that's deliberate, sometimes it's not deliberate, but that's the way it is. There are more women and more young people in the third and in the second committee than in the first committee, or in the Security Council, or in the legal affairs. But we try to incorporate this. If we have enough, if the delegation has enough young youth delegates, one per committee, that's very, very good. And they participate in the meetings as if they were delegates. And they read the speeches, they participate in decision-making processes, writing the speeches, they can give their opinion about resolutions, they can say, we don't agree with this, this is not something that we think it's correct, and then we try to incorporate that thinking, because it's a fresh point of view from priorities that maybe are not the priorities of the governmental delegations, but are the priorities of the people and the experience from the ground. So they are very valuable, I think. So that's more or less.
Thank you, Tonie. This is really encouraging, and I think can serve as a blueprint for other countries. Really grateful for that you shared your experience. I'm conscious about the time, and so I just want to ask my last question and ask you to be maybe 30, 60 seconds. Yeah, 30 seconds. And it's a question from Suyin from the Australian delegation. And the question goes the following way. What concrete actions on the ground would you like to see delegations take towards youth engagement at the RevCon over the next few weeks? Dahee.
Okay, so I'll follow your guideline and be very brief. I would like to see the next step. I would like to see how the youth participation and engagement will do for the next review cycle and this review conference, and also for the next 5 or whatever years that we might be having. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think I see Ksenia. Oh, Tonie?
Yeah, just very quickly, it's the same. I think that the young people, even if they are not organized, or what I mean, let me rephrase. Young people don't need to be organized in civil society organizations or in academia or think tanks or in the universities, or to influence and to become a voice of support and pressure for the work that the governments do. So here at the RevCon, so the civil society and the academia and the public in general have a lot of tools like social media, like established channels, governmental channels, and also academic channels to say, to support what governments are doing. And not only to criticize, but also to support. And that way, there are good outcomes that have, general support from the public, no? And also there is some pressure to do the right thing for delegations, okay? So that is not exclusive of organized civil society.
Thank you, Tonie. Ksenia and Dilan, if you want to use your chance at 30 seconds, Ksenia, please.
Sure. I just wanted to quickly add up to the social media part, because I think I agree with Tonie that, the youth can do something even outside of, being delegation or being the part of civil society. And I think even talking about what happening in the NPT Review Conference on social media, on like any platforms would already add a lot to the way people see it, and actually maybe even just know it, because I think that's a huge problem that not a lot of people know that it's even happening. So I think younger youth voices can actually, make NPT more vocal on various platforms.
Thank you. And if you want to learn how to engage with all sorts of social media channels in a good way, follow Ksenia. I also love what Atomic Reporters are doing. Also, it's youth-driven organization. And finally, Dilan, please.
Yeah, I know we're at time, and I agree with what everyone said, but I just would like to say that I think the youth could be more aware of how disarmament is related to whatever they're interested in, whether they're interested in climate change or migration or cybersecurity, anything that disarmament has a role in it and it's in some way connected. So I think realizing that might really help with the disarmament goal and with youth involvement in these issues in general in peace and security. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dilan. And we are so good and so disciplined with time, running only 2 minutes later. But in order to conclude our fantastic discussion, and before I give the floor for concluding remarks to Anuradha Damle, I just want to thank, on my own behalf, our speakers and our fantastic audience. The questions and the comments were really great. Please, Anuradha.
Thank you so much, Togzhan, and to all of our speakers. On behalf of BASIC and our co-organizers, UNODA and the Republic of Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I want to thank everyone for attending, for staying with us, and asking good questions and staying with us for our first of 3 events that are taking place over the next week or so. We at BASIC really care about true inclusion, substantive and meaningful engagement with high-level spaces and influencing nuclear policy spaces in ways that perhaps don't feel obvious to us, and being representative of the world and the engagement that we do. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again to our speakers, to Togzhan and to Chris King for your time. We are going to be ending this now because we're about to go into our working group sprint. If you are joining us, we're really excited to see you there. It will start in 15 minutes. The Zoom link should be in your account. But for now, take care and thank you very much. Bye-bye.